What's up, guys? Well, I thought we were live. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Brand podcast. And today we have some breaking news, something that's been happening in the Etsy sellers community. And I've got a lot of stuff going on here, Chris. I think I can hear double here again. So we have to stop doing that. So let's do that again, Chris. Chris, is everything working? Let me just make sure that we're live here and we'll cut this out
It,
afterwards. But are we in fact live?
it appears that we are. We have a bunch of people rolling in. So, guys, let us know if you can see and hear us, so that Scott knows that he can see and hear himself.
All right, let's do it again. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Brand podcast. I am fired up because today we have some breaking news that could really affect us Etsy sellers in a positive way if we look at it that way. And I will explain, but we are going to be talking about something that had happened within Etsy and what it's done to some of its sellers, and then why some of the sellers are very mad and why this could be a good thing for us. And we're going to talk a little bit about Q4. So that's what we're going to be talking about here on this episode. We are also going to be answering any questions that you have on this. And if you do have any questions on Q4, because we are approaching Q4, even though we are in August right now, we should be thinking about that, by the way. We'll answer those as well. We've got a few that have been asked over the last week that we're going to bring up, and we'll talk about those as well. So with that being said, Chris, we would just want to kind of throw it out there and say what this big news is.
Yeah, let's just jump in on it. And Scott, this is something we've been hearing some rumblings about this for a few months, and there's been a few sellers that were affected, but realistically, it kind of came to a head last week, to the point where The Verge, which is one of the bigger tech publications for normal people, right? Where you have industry insider publications that are more like TechCrunch, but The Verge is read by more normal people, tech news, if that makes sense, picked up on it. And we're starting to see that a lot of sellers are pushing back against this. And really what's happening is Etsy rolled out some changes to their fraud protection program. And we're hearing what seems like, and we'll get to this here in a minute, what seems like the world is collapsing for Etsy sellers, because we're starting to see this pop up on major news websites. We're seeing this on Reddit. We're seeing this in Facebook groups. So we wanted to talk about what's really going on, who this is actually affecting, and what the opportunity is here for us. And then how to kind of protect yourself a little bit against this happening to you if it's something that does end up happening to your shop.
So, Chris, why don't we do this, though? Why don't we have you explain exactly what this looks like if you were one of these sellers? So what happened to, or what could happen still? What does this mean? They're holding money. They're not letting you have access to the money. They're freezing your account. What's happening? Why is it happening? Why don't you break that down in a nutshell, just so people understand why these Etsy sellers are mad? And I mean, heck, I'd be mad. You would be mad, right? So let's talk about that. Then we'll talk about how this can actually be a good thing for us, not wishing bad things on people, but why this could be a good thing for us, and why there's going to be a little bit of less competition now because of this. So why don't you go ahead and just kind of break it down so we kind of understand what's happened here?
Yeah, this got, to your point, I think you and I would both be mad about this. My grandfather has a phrase that's one of my favorite things that he says, which is $50 is $50, right? Doesn't matter how rich you are. If somebody's got your money, you're going to be a little upset about it. Or it doesn't matter how big your business is. If somebody's holding on to your money, you're going to be a little bit of upset about it. And Etsy for a while has had what they refer to as their fraud protection program. And they've really stepped up the enforcement in the last few months. And essentially what happens is they have it's an automated process, as far as I'm aware, that says, hey, if there's a massive increase in orders on a store, or there's a massive increase in fulfillment problems or customer complaints, or there's a variety of different things that can trigger this. But the biggest, most obvious one is if you go from 0 to 100 orders a day, they're saying, hey, let's hold off on this a minute and make sure that this is a legitimate seller that can actually fulfill on these orders. And there's two sides of this. One, they want to protect their image as a platform by saying, hey, we're not going to allow spammers and scammers to come onto the platform and not fulfill orders. And this was something we saw back in 2016, 2017, Scott, on Amazon, if you remember, where a Chinese company, for lack of a better example, would come in, they'd spin up 15 different accounts, they'd sell a whole bunch of products, take the money and run away with it and never ship the product, and just let the accounts get shut down because they didn't really care. And Etsy's trying to avoid something similar happen on the platform. And what will happen if you trigger one of their automated things that will cause your account to go into this status is they can start to withhold in reserve up to 75% of the revenue collected from the customer. So if the customer pays $100 for an order, Etsy will hold in reserve until that order is completed, meaning the customer has received the product, up to 75 of those $100. And that can be an extremely frustrating thing, especially as we're moving into the fourth quarter, because for every $100 that we're making in sales, we then have $25 to create, ship, and complete the order. And then we're just kind of sitting around waiting for the other $75 to come through so that we can continue on with our business. You know, the example that they use in this article is paying your mortgage, yada, 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 yada. And Dave Hardy in the comments just said it's supposed to go away if you reach star seller status. And that's not necessarily the case. It's one of the solutions that they give to people. But if you have a big increase in orders, then it can still happen. And it's still happening to sellers. And in fact, in this article, I believe, and I'd have to read through it again, but they do talk about the star seller status, and some of the sellers being affected are star sellers. So the question would become, Scott, what can we do to avoid this? Is there anything we can do to avoid this? And then how can we turn this into an opportunity? The other thing I wanted to talk about was how big of a problem is this really? And so where do you want to kind of start with that? Is there a way that I can make clearer what's going on, right? Basically, certain things happen on Etsy. Yep. They can withhold up to 75% of the revenue. Once the order is completed, they are then releasing that money rather than giving you all of the money up front.
I think the big thing for people right now, probably listening, that this might not have happened to is like, what can I do to protect myself from this potentially happening, you know, to my Etsy shop? So I think I'd like to start there, Chris. And is there anything that anyone can do to prevent this from happening so they don't get their account frozen and they don't get their, you know, their revenue, 75% of it held? What can people do to protect themselves? So I want to speak to that first, and then we'll talk about like what we should be doing moving forward, and should we be worried about this? So could you kind of address that?
Yeah, so the biggest things would be doing basic customer service stuff. And where I'm seeing a lot of people get caught up in this system is that they're not shipping orders with tracking information. And so one of the things that it said in the Verge article, Scott, and they were talking about the star seller requirements, they said it's not feasible for all sellers on the platform to respond to messages within 24 hours, right? And the only time that I can imagine that that's not feasible is in some sort of a family emergency situation, right? Like your wife is in labor and you're in the hospital with her and can't look at your phone for 5 minutes to respond to a customer message. But the bigger issue that I'm seeing across Reddit, Facebook groups, and even it is mentioned in this article as well, is the making sure that you're shipping orders with tracking information. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it's just good customer service to do anyway. And two, that then gives Etsy some sort of an indication that you are at least fulfilling the order. Because if they don't know that you've shipped the order, you just mark it as shipped. Then if there's a customer issue and the customer says, hey, Scott didn't ship me my t-shirt, they have no way of verifying that. And so it streamlines their customer service process for you to be able to do that. So the biggest thing that I would say, and there's never going to be a way to prevent it. And I know, I think Amber in the comments just said, you know, one of my shops is on reserve for an increase in sales, right? And so even if we're doing everything right, if there's a massive increase in sales, then that can happen. So we can't 100% prevent it. But if we're doing basic customer service stuff, trying to meet, to Dave's point, trying to meet the star seller requirements, making sure that we're messaging people back, making sure that we're including that shipping info, we can massively reduce the possibility of this happening. The other thing that I wanted to point out here, Scott, is it seems like this is a much bigger deal than it actually is. And I'm not saying that if this happens to your account, that it's not a big deal. It absolutely is, right? Somebody taking $75 out of your pocket and saying, well, I'll give this to you down the road. That is a big deal. But we're hearing a lot more about this because we're seeing it on Facebook. We're seeing it on Reddit. We're seeing it being written about. And when we look at the actual numbers, this is actually only impacting 2 to 3% of accounts on the entire platform. And so, yes, it's something we should take proactive steps to try to avoid. But also, there's a 98% chance that it won't happen to our store, even if we're not taking those steps proactively. And so that's something I want people to keep in mind. It's not as common of an issue as it appears to be, but when it happens to people, it's an extremely frustrating issue. So let's keep that in the back of our head. Like, this is not going to happen to every single account. It's not guaranteed to happen to us. If we take a few steps forward in the right direction to help prevent it to us, Dave, you're absolutely special in all kinds of ways, not just because your Etsy account is on reserve. But if we take a few basic steps up front, we can reduce that risk even further. And then if it happens, we just have to know, and we have to be prepared for it and have a contingency plan for in case it happens. And Scott, I would say that the people who struggle with this, and I want your opinion on this, the people who this would impact the most, I would think, would be somebody who makes custom furniture or something like that, where they have a big upfront product cost. Am I missing something there?
Say that again.
Am I missing something there? Like, is there another group who should be actively thinking about this? Is this something everybody should be actively planning for? Or is it less of a big deal if you're using like the print on demand model? And this is a conversation I think you and I were having earlier where, like, if we have a $9 product cost on a $30 sale and they're holding 75% of revenue, yeah, it stinks. But that's very different than if we have a $70 product cost and they're holding $75 of a $100 sale. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right. 100%. So the way I look at it is, okay, so they're holding money because they don't want to release the money until they know that these customers have been taken care of. At least that's how I'm seeing it, right? It's kind of like a protection thing because, again, it's for fraud because people have abused the system. So that's always going to happen. We've seen it on Amazon a number of times, and it just happens, right? It's like when someone finds a loophole and then they start to abuse something, and in this case, it's fraud. They're putting up products and then not delivering on the products. Now Etsy has to protect the platform to make their customers and their buyers feel safe and secure, right? So that's why they're taking those precautions. My question is this, Chris, and do we know, is there a time frame that they're putting you in reserve, or that they are not even freezing your account? Because the way that I see it, you can still sell, right? You just can't collect the money. You can still keep getting sales. They're not freezing your account necessarily. They're just basically making it so you can't get those funds until they have basically seen that your account has been doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I know someone had said, well, I've got Star Seller. There's no reasons why this could happen. And I don't know why it would happen. That would be something then you would then contact Etsy's support and show them all of that stuff and say, where is there a problem? And hopefully get an answer. Not saying that you will, but my big thing is here is like, as long as they're not keeping the money and saying you're not going to get it. So if you've done everything and if all the customers have gotten their items, then you should get your money and you can still keep selling. That's a lot better than getting your account frozen or suspended where you can't sell anymore. So Chris, am I missing something there?
No. To your first question, Scott, is there like a timeline? The answer is basically when the order is completed is kind of when they're putting those funds back into processing. But one of the things that I think a lot of people miss in this, and I want to kind of put this in context, is like PayPal is kind of famous for this. And if you remember back in the day with eBay, right? Like they can just hold your money for 90, 120, like they can hold your money for a while. So this is not a new thing. And in fact, somebody had just pointed out in the comments, there's a lot of platforms, and Amazon here kind of comes to mind, that keep funds for 30, 60, 90 days as standard policy. And we have kind of gotten a little spoiled by the cash flow that we get from Etsy. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying this is not a big deal and it's not frustrating, because it is a change, but it is kind of a very different approach than most other platforms have taken, because essentially once the order is complete, they should be releasing those funds to you on the standard payout, which is as soon as basically the next day. And so there's not a fixed limit on when they're going to do this. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to ensure that you can fulfill on the volume that you have. And I think this, it seems like a bad thing for sellers, but it is honestly probably a good thing in Q4. It's kind of like having a parent that's overly strict, if that makes sense. And the way that I'm thinking about this is they're trying to make sure that one, their customers are taken care of, but two, that their sellers aren't taking orders that are an overwhelming volume for them and that they could never fulfill. So they're doing the Costco thing. Have you ever heard about how Costco deals with wholesale, Scott? Where like if your company gets into Costco, they want to verify exactly how much revenue you're making on other sources so that they can make sure that they're not too big of a chunk of your revenue.
Right.
That's kind of the same thing that I see Etsy doing with this. It's a buyer protection mechanism, but it's also a seller protection mechanism. And it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But really what they're trying to make sure that they're doing is making sure that their buyers get what they want and that they're not overwhelming you and giving you too many orders, if that makes sense. I know it doesn't sound like a positive because of the restrictive nature of it, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it. It's not an uncommon thing, but it is a frustrating way of going about it.
It is. Okay. But let's put this into context though. Okay. And it's like Julia had brought up, right? Like Amazon's been doing that forever. Right. We also use Mediavine, which is an ad network that basically when people arrive to your website, they see an ad, you get paid for that ad. Right. Same thing with YouTube ads. You're always 30 days minimum that they're holding. You're like 30 days behind. Right. And the reason why the ad networks do that is because they have to basically settle out as far as like, they've estimated what your earnings are, but then they finalize the earnings. So that's why they don't want to overpay you until they know what the actual number is, until the end of the month has came and settled and all of that stuff. And then they give you your money. So like I just got a payment from Mediavine on 2 of our niche sites that we have that are content sites. And that was from like 2 months ago. Right. Like, so it's like you have to understand that yes, Etsy used to do it where you can get paid like that day. Like they even have it set up where you can get paid daily. You can get paid weekly. You can get paid monthly. Like you can set it up anyway. It's kind of risky on their part to do it that way because if they do release the funds and then there was something wrong, then there's a whole, you got to go back and figure out like, like what orders weren't processed. And it's a whole mess in the back end. So I just would have assumed that Etsy would have operated like Amazon where you're going to be at least 30 days, right? So this way here, everything can kind of settle out. And you're not getting paid ahead of time before other, things happen, refunds, things like that. So as much as it really does suck, we have to put it into context. It's not like your account is frozen and you can't sell, right? That would be bad, right? All we're talking about is delaying. Now, if you're delayed more than 30 days, then yeah, that's going to be a problem because the way that it works now is like, let's say you're doing print on demand and you have your credit card attached to that, to Printify, let's say, right? An order gets processed, it gets billed, you get billed for it, but then you got 30 days to pay for it. Well, guess what? You're going to get paid from Etsy in 30 days to pay that bill. Well, if they hold it longer than 30 days, that's a problem, right? Because now we're putting money out that we're not getting back. So now you're always going to be, you're going to be out of that money until it comes back. So you got to have a little bit of a cushion there. But just to put this in context here, guys, Chris and I, we come from the, the private label world and like making your own products and having to buy 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 units at a clip and having $10, $20, $30,000 in inventory sitting there and you're not getting paid until you sell it. We're kind of getting spoiled here, right? So I don't want to downplay it. But I want you to also realize like still a pretty good thing here, pretty good gig here with this Etsy thing. I'm just saying. The other thing I would say, Chris, too, is, and I want people to keep in mind here before they jump ship on Etsy is you have to also understand you're also able to tap into their platform, right? You're able to tap into their traffic. So if you get rid of Etsy right now, what happens to you? Now, someone had brought up, now's the time to start building your website, your external traffic. I agree. 100%, right? But you also can't deny like still pretty good little gig over there on Etsy that they give us all their traffic. They give us, marketing. Yes, Etsy ads cost us money, but they still give us the opportunity to do it. Like all of these things that people complain about, it's still, they're giving you access, right? And they're making it pretty easy. So we can't get too upset about this. The thing that I really want to stress is like, I'm not getting that upset about it. It didn't happen to me yet, right? Hopefully it never does. Knock on wood, it hasn't, right? But let's just put it in context. If it did happen, I'd be like, oh, that sucks. But I wouldn't be as upset as if they froze my account, right? Or they suspended my account and I couldn't sell anymore. And here we are heading into Q4. That happens on Amazon a lot, by the way, guys. Like people are doing like thousands of dollars per month. Like I had one guy that was doing $30K a month in sales, and they froze his account, suspended it until it was under review. It didn't get, I don't think it got reinstated for like 40 or 50 days. So he lost like 40 grand, like in sales. And then all of the rankings start to go down because the sales are going down, like everything kind of, so let's just put it in context. It's a bad thing, right? It sucks, but it's not the worst thing. So Chris, anything else we want to touch on there? And guys, if you guys have any questions on this, or if you have any stories on this, share them in the comments. Let us know. We would love to know more about this by kind of reaching a little bit of a larger audience. And then if you could also do me one other favor, if you guys could just, I'm going to say it differently here today. Instead of saying, can you hit the like button? Can you tickle it a little bit? Just give it a little tickle. Just, maybe give us a little love on that like button there. And that'll help us. That'll help the algorithm. It'll help us reach more people. It'll help us help more people. So we would appreciate that. So just give it a little tickle. I like that, Chris. I'm just going to say to tickle the like button.
So what you're saying is they don't have to smash it. They can just
don't hurt anything. Don't hurt anything.
And it'll work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
plus it'll make your screen last a little bit longer because you can just,
right.
You don't have to smash it. Kel said, I like Etsy, but the customers are the worst. That's actually the exact opposite experience that I've had. Etsy customers tend to be a lot more forgiving. You will occasionally run into somebody that's like, if you don't do exactly what I want, because I know that this is more of a custom platform, then I'm going to give you a 1-star review. Well, guess what? That's against terms of service. And if that happens, then you have recourse, right? Just screenshot that message and it's not going to be a problem. Versus Amazon, where I've had a lot of other issues. I think the biggest thing here that people need to keep in mind is, one, if you are going to make Etsy a big portion of your business, you do need to be really conscious of trying to stay on top of all of the things that you should be doing, right?
100%.
And the way that Etsy classifies those things are under the star seller requirements, making sure that we're correctly messaging customers, making sure that we're shipping orders with tracking information, all of those kinds of things. And outside of this, it really is becoming a little bit more of a cash flow issue for people. And that is an issue that it is easier to resolve for some businesses than others. And I had said earlier, I think this is easier to deal with if you're operating in a print-on-demand business model than you are in other business models. And just Fly Sean said 75% is a big deal no matter what the reason, especially if fees are being withheld from the 25% that they are releasing. And that I hadn't seen, but it also wouldn't surprise me, right? Because they're collecting those fees at the same time. But what they're withholding is not anything more than the revenue they would be paying out to you anyway. So you're still getting 25% of what you would be getting paid. You just get the 75% later. And while 75% is a big deal for anybody, it's a much bigger deal if your capital outlay is $70 on that product versus $6, or let's just say $7 to make it even, right? If I get 1,000 orders with $7 of capital outlay because I'm doing print on demand, it's a lot easier to cash flow that with a credit card or with our bank balance, with the other 75% that's coming in from the old orders, than it is if my capital outlay is $70 or $100. Because if I get 100 orders with that type of an outlay, it's still that $7,000 in capital that I have to have versus 1,000 orders. And so, yes, the reward on the backside is bigger, but it's harder to get to a place where you can cash flow $70 an order than it is $7 an order, especially because on the print on demand side of stuff, you're shipping those orders within a day or two, typically, right? Yep. You're immediately submitting them into Printful, Printify, whoever you're using as your partner, and they're going out. So you're going to have that constant stream coming in. versus if you're selling a $150 product, that's probably more of a custom thing that you're like in the garage building, or you're back in the wood shop working on it, something like that. And so the order flow is a longer time frame that you have that capital laid out as well. And so to me, I would say, this is a lot less of an issue for people who are selling, even at the same margin, lower cost products than it is for people who are selling higher cost products. It's going to affect everyone equally from a percentage perspective, but from a cash flow perspective, it's a lot easier to cash flow those lower dollar orders than it is to cash flow the higher dollar orders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Let's switch gears a little bit here. Okay. What I do want to say though, before we move on, is if you have a new account, like I'm saying, like within a month, and it gets suspended, or where it gets basically flagged, that's normal. Okay. So don't take what we're talking about as a new shop this happening to. That's probably just the banking that is getting verified. That is, I mean, that I hear that more times than not, that if you have a new account, that it's going to basically get put under review. So it'll basically make it where you can't sell yet. And a lot of times that's either something is off with the banking, or it hasn't verified it, or it is verifying and it won't reinstate it until it gets verified. So just keep that in mind. We're talking about, you've been selling for a little while, you've had some sales, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're in reserve. And that could be something that is within your orders being processed. It could be something maybe in that category. Maybe there was that category got flagged for whatever reason, or certain products or something like that. Don't know. I don't work for Etsy, but I'm just kind of surmising here. So let's just think about it as, this is something that, yes, it sucks. It's a hiccup. We don't want it to happen. But it's not the end of the world, because it's not that we can't still sell. That's the big one that I really want to put there. Because if we were heading into Q4 like we are, and I can't sell, that's a problem, right? That's a big problem. If you want to pay me later, that's fine. But let me just keep selling, right? I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. And speaking of opportunities, let's talk about how we can flip this on its head and create something good out of something negative. And to me, right now, I look at this like, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on Reddit. Reddit is blowing up, right? Facebook communities are blowing up. People are like, this sucks. Etsy, this, they're, taking money from us. They're doing this. We're going to just leave. Guess what, guys? They're going to go. And what's that going to do? It's going to create more opportunity for the people that stay, right? So that's fine. If you think there's a better platform out there for you because you're just fed up with this, go for it. Right. But you're going to probably find out it's, like I said, we've been selling on Amazon. Well, we don't currently sell anymore. We sold our last brand, and we kind of like paused on Amazon. Amazon's a whole nother animal. But when we're talking about, like, okay, Amazon, it's got a lot of, same issues, right? But let me just tell you, you can go over to Walmart and try it over on Walmart. You're not going to get maybe 20% if you're lucky, right? Everybody that I talk to usually says about 10%. So you're going to do the same thing with Etsy. You'll be like, screw it. I'm just going to go on over to eBay, or I'm going to go over to, just fill in the blanks, right? And you're going to go over there and go, wow, there's just not as much traffic, or, this isn't as good, right? So this should be something that makes you say, okay, I probably should have my own traffic channel. I should probably have my own website that I can create and make transactions happen. Yes, you're right. You should do that. Should you do it right now before Q4 and you think that that's going to offset it? Probably not. I wouldn't do it at this point in time. I mean, I think you should be doing it, but I don't necessarily think that should be the main focus right now. We are heading into Q4, right? If you want to believe it or not, like, it's August. And you might be saying, well, Scott, Q4, I mean, doesn't that start around like, Black Friday? So shouldn't we start like a month before that? No, you should be starting right now. So my thing is, right now, this whole buzz and this whole like disruption in the Etsy seller community is actually a good thing for you. If you're just like, okay, cool. I'm going to deal with it. I know there's some pros and cons to selling on here, but I'm still getting all of these benefits, and I'm just going to put my head down, create some great products, get them up there, get them listed as quick as I possibly can, because Halloween's coming, Thanksgiving's coming, and Christmas is coming, right? And that would be my big thing is, okay, let them go, right? Let them talk. While they're talking and having a conversation in that chat, I'm just going to be over there working away, right? And posting products and doing all the things that we're doing for Q4 so we can blow it up.
So, Scott, like I said a few minutes ago, this is really only affecting, according to Etsy, 2% of accounts, but let's just triple that and say 5 to 6% of accounts.
Sure.
Right. One of the Etsy seller communities, and I think it was actually the Etsy seller support community over on Facebook, put up a poll, and their group members said 5% of them are now leaving Etsy because of this. 32% are thinking of leaving, and 54% said that they're staying no matter what. So let's just say those 5% of people actually leave. That means I can secure at a minimum 5% more sales, right? And instead of worrying about this, the more correct approach, or storming off, right? Taking your ball and going home, which, yes, this sucks if this happens to your account, but the grass is not always greener on the other side from a traffic perspective, from a sales perspective, from a volume perspective, from any of these perspectives, right? And what we need to do is, instead of just taking our ball and going home, as sellers, if we want to maximize on this, is one, double down on what we're doing that's working, and two, figure out the cash flow side of this. Because at the end of the day, this is not, Scott, to your point, you are banned from selling on the platform, or we're taking all of your listings down, or any of those kinds of things, which happens. I'm on the phone with Amazon probably twice a month saying, hey, why'd you take my listing down? Oh, because of this. Okay, that's not a thing, right? Like, I don't care what the person said. That's not a thing. If you look at all of the support tickets we've ever put in, here's the answer to that question. Oh, okay. And then the listing is back. That's not what's happening right now on Etsy. It's just that you run into a cash flow issue. So rather than storming off, our job needs to be to double down on what we're doing that's working, and focus on solving the problem that we have control over. And it's very easy as an entrepreneur to get bogged down in the sky is falling mentality. And Scott, I think you and I have shared in the past the entrepreneurial roller coaster image, right? Where it's like the average day in the life of an entrepreneur, and it's like this. And it's really easy to get stuck at the bottom. But quite honestly, for I'd say 99.9% of the people who are affected by this issue, if we think of it as a cash flow problem, then we have something to attack. We have a problem that we can solve. And as an entrepreneur, your job is not actually running the business most days. It's usually putting out fires and solving problems. And if we can focus on the problem at hand, which is potentially having a short-term, right, cash flow issue, then what can we do as sellers to start to plan to get around that? Can we get a credit card? Can we open up a line of credit as the business? Is there a way that we can solve a short-term cash flow issue and then be able to focus on capitalizing on the 5% of people that say they're absolutely leaving, and the 32% of people who are saying they're thinking about leaving? That's going to leave us a lot of opportunity if all we can do is solve a cash flow problem that, again, is affecting a small minority of sellers, but for the people who it is affecting, it's a big deal.
Yep. No, I think that's all good stuff. Okay. So let's move into Q4, guys. Like, let's talk about like what we can do. Like, what can we do to have a better Q4 instead of just talking about like all of the bad stuff, right, that's happening, or, Etsy's doing this and whatever. Like, if you want to, so again, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. If you want to stick around and we can talk about how to do better for Q4, then stick around. That's what we're going to kind of move into next. If you're cool and you don't want to talk about that, that's fine too. Head on off, get some lunch, whatever you're doing next in your day. And thanks for stopping by. But what we want to do here is talk about Q4, because that's what we're really actively working on right now. And I say we, myself, my wife, Chris, we are focusing on that. That's what we're doing. I think my wife put up like 4 new products yesterday. She's creating new designs as we speak. We're making sure that things are all dialed in, and we're constantly thinking and doing product research and trying to figure out what is going to allow us to really have the best Q4, right? And Chris, you talk about like taking your ball and going home. It's kind of funny because I treat this as a game, right? It's like if we went to the schoolyard and we were going to play kickball, right? You got your little ball. I'm not going to play with you anymore. You guys cheat, right? It's like, okay, go on. but we're going to play some kickball. So I like to think about this as like a game. And so I think about it like last season, what did we do? How can we outdo that? Right. And you're going to also look and see what worked last year and what didn't work. Or maybe you're going to see a certain product type that worked. And then you're like, wow, that was pretty popular. Maybe we should do not just the product, but what we put on the product. And I think that's the cool thing about print on demand stuff is like the product is one thing. Like people like t-shirts, they like sweatshirts, they like pillows, they like flags, they like blankets, they like, different things, right? But you're going to find that there's certain items for your niche that are going to work better. All right. Right. And you're going to see that by past history. If you have some, if you don't, then it's your first year to kind of get in the game. Right. So you got to think about it that way. So speaking of that, Q4 stuff, if you are at all interested, I'm going to give a little shameless plug here. Chris and I are going to be running what we're calling is our Etsy Q4 training camp. And I want you to think about this like football season's coming. Right. And if you're not into football, it doesn't matter. Okay. But the football season's coming, right? I don't know, Chris, when is the first game officially? September 3rd, maybe something like that. I think something is maybe like the first game.
Which, Scott, we have some breaking news coming in. I don't mean to cut you off, but the BBC literally just published an article saying that Etsy is going to be decreasing the amount. Since we've been on live, they published this, that they are holding in reserve for people who are affected. So wow.
Okay.
We'll see what happens with that. But that's a piece of interesting news that happens. This is what happens when we do stuff live.
I guess that's live. Breaking news. Chris breaks in. He's going to give you some breaking news. All right. So what I was talking about is football season. So let's just say first game is September 3rd, 5th, whatever, right? First week in September. Well, they're in training camp, probably 6 weeks before the season even starts. And what are they doing? They're getting ready for the season. Okay. Now, right now, the time of recording this and doing this live, it is August. So we're planning for Halloween. Then we're planning for Thanksgiving. Then we're planning for Christmas. And we're doing this all early. And this is what we call our preseason. All right. And so what we're doing is we're running a 4-week camp. All right. Training camp. And we're basically going to show up live 4 times. And we are going to be sharing what we're working on, but then also helping we're calling them campers. We're going to help our camp attendees, and we're going to help them with theirs. We're even going to have them submit their shops, and we're going to be basically help them and really just review and kind of go over some growth strategies so we can really, really optimize for the Q4 and be ready to win this season. So if you're interested in joining us, you can head on over to brandcreators.com/camp, get all the information over there. And depending on when you're watching this, there should be an open enrollment there. And if you go there after the fact, it will be closed, but you can sign up for the wait list if we choose to do a new one before fourth quarter. All right. So right now is the best time to get in because we are just starting to work towards getting ready for Q4. All right. And by the time we get done with this camp, it'll be first week in September. So there you go. All right. So if you're interested, check that out. All right. So moving on, Chris, let's talk about this. And I think we had a question come in too that was similar to what I'm about to say here is how do we take advantage of Q4 on Etsy right now, today? Chris, what kind of steps would you say, and what would you say would be the most important thing to do for someone right now? Let's say they're just starting or they're fairly new. What would you say to take advantage of for this upcoming Q4?
I would say the 2 biggest things that you should be looking at is right now, since it's the beginning of the Q4 preparation period, is really doubling down on the product research side of things to figure out what sold well. Both what kinds of things sold well in your niche and what types of products sold well in other niches that you can come up with ideas to apply in your niche. And then taking those ideas, whether they're the ones that worked well in your niche last year or the ones that worked really well in the other niches that you are now applying to your niche, and double down on the design process. Get those products designed up and launched as soon as possible. Follow that up with Etsy ads, get all of the data back that you can. But right now, the very first thing that I would be doing is tripling down on the product research and then the product design side of things. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that. I love the product research. That's actually what we're currently doing right now. In just to kind of give you guys, if you don't know how our little operation works here, Lisa, my wife, she's the one that it's her Etsy shop. It's more of a side hustle for her. Did over $65,000 last year, and obviously we're going to try to beat that this year, and I think we will. A good portion of that revenue came from Q4, so I know that we could probably do all of that even in a Q4. Depends on if we find the right products and all that stuff. But I would agree with you. I think right now we're kind of look at it like we're planting seeds, right? Like we're doing the research. So this way here, we can put out products that are proven to sell. But the other thing that we want to pay attention to, and this is something that we've been paying attention to, is are there certain colors? Are there certain trending things? And I don't like using the word trending because people then go, oh, I'm just going to create something that's trending and then just sell that. And I'm going to have a whole bunch of products that are just random. No, if you look at certain colors or certain items, maybe right now, tumblers are hot, right? Well, start putting your niche specific stuff on a tumbler, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be a tumbler company. It means that that product is doing well. People seem to like that product. So why not make it work for your niche if it can? So those are the things that we're working on right now as we speak. And like I said, my wife is designing right now, mostly for Halloween, but also some fall. And then once she gets that batch in there, and we get closer, she'll then move into Thanksgiving, and then she'll move into Christmas. And the crazy thing is, though, is when you're doing this and when you're able to start launching these products after you've created them, you've done your research, you started creating and you started launching. The cool thing that happens is when you start listing new products, it also notifies people that have already favorited your shop or favorited items. And we've already seen a tick up in sales just from launching new products this past week, which is crazy. And we even sold some Christmas stuff, which is even crazier. So that's what I would say. I agree with Chris. Make sure you're doing your product research. If you guys are not using Everbee, that's my tool of choice. You can go to brandcreators.com/Everbee. You can try it for free. I actually just recorded a video, which I'll link that up in the description of this. And I just shot a video showing 6 tips to increase your sales for this holiday season. And one of them tips, I show a really cool hidden feature inside of Everbee that allows you to look back at the historical data, which is really powerful for the holidays, because right now, if you're searching for Halloween stuff, you're probably not going to see a lot of stuff that's selling right now, right? It's going to be, but not yet. We want to look back in time. And there's a way you can do that now in Everbee, and I show that in that video. So definitely check that video out too. Like I said, I'll drop that link in the description, and you guys can watch that later. It's like 9 minutes. It's really, really short, but I went right into 6 tips. So check that out. Chris, you got any other questions in the comments before I move on to the next question I have queued up?
We have a couple coming in around different things, but let's jump into that, and then we'll kind of knock through the rest of these. We have a bunch about the camp. Unless you want to address those now, we can do that.
Yeah, let's address those. And the next one up though will be we'll do something on Etsy ads. That's a big one that a lot of people want to know, like some details on like when, what, how much, like all of that stuff. We'll go ahead and dig into that because I know it's a big popular topic. But yeah, Chris, what do we got for questions on the camp?
What time and day will the calls be for the camp? I know we said we're going to do 4 live calls. They're most likely going to be on Wednesdays, and what we're talking about right now is the afternoons, most likely 3 p.m. I think, Scott, with the exception of the first one, correct me if I'm wrong on that, which will likely be noon or 1 p.m. Eastern time. And if you can't make the calls, you are going to get access to replays. I know that's something we'll get asked about. And you can always just email support@brandcreators.com with any questions that you have. We'll answer them on the call. And then when you can get to the replay, you'll be able to do that as well. Even if you can make the calls, you'll have access to the replay. So there's that as well. The other question that we got was, do you have a payment plan for the Q4 camp? And the answer is not an official payment plan, but if you use the PayPal option, you can use PayPal Pay in 4, which would split that into 4 payments for you. Or you should also be able to use PayPal Credit, which would allow you to pay that over 6 months interest-free. So both of those are options that are available right now at brandcreators.com/camp.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say before we move on, as far as like when you're joining, like now, even before this Sunday, there is a little discount that we're offering. I say little, it's a pretty good discount, but it's offered up through this Sunday. And then we're going to keep it open until next Tuesday, but then we are going to close it Tuesday night because we're going to prepare for Wednesday's kickoff training session. And I did want to say this as well. If you join like soon, we're going to be sending out an email here today or tomorrow that's going to basically allow everyone that is signed up to submit their Etsy shop if they would like us to do a live review and growth audit for Q4. So we are going to be doing that because we want to have probably like 4 or 5 shops that we're going to be doing that with. So this way here, we can also do real examples. We can dig in, we can do the research together, and that'll be really training session camp day 1 will be really like how to find those products and really how to drill in, and not just the products themselves, but the designs and things like that. So that's going to be session number 1. So that's one thing that the early signups will be getting access to, because I'm going to go ahead and send that email out for people to submit their shop. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you get in soon, because I'm going to send that email out here for people to start submitting their shops. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and let's address this one, Chris. This is a good one. Chris, how soon should I start running Etsy ads for Q4? And I'm saying like right now, we are August, let's say, and depending on when you're thinking of Q4, let's say Halloween is October 31st, August. So we have August, September, and October. How soon should we start running Etsy ads?
Yesterday. The reason that I say that is the sooner we get started, the sooner we start to get the data back. And there's 2 really important things that come out of that. One, we know how much we're spending, and we can then start to optimize that spend. So Scott, in the past, we've talked about Tumblr versus Mug versus whatever. And I definitely need a new Tumblr. So if anybody has some good examples for some really cool things on Etsy, feel free to send it my way. But you know, you might call this a Tumblr. You might call this a thermos. If you want to use the branded terminology, you might call that a mug. You might call it a travel cup, right? There's a bunch of different things. And if we're running ads for a custom mug, thermos, tumbler, travel cup on Etsy, please don't use that as your title. But if that is something we're running ads for, Etsy's going to start to give us impressions for all of those different terms. And what we will start to see, the sooner we start running ads, the sooner we get this data back, what we will start to see is if somebody types in Tumblr, they click and they buy. If somebody types in thermos, they're looking for, you know, the branded one. Or somebody types in travel mug, they're looking for one with the handle on it, and they're not really buying our thing. So we can start to turn that off inside the ads and optimize that ad spend, right? So the sooner we start running ads, the sooner we get the data back, which means the sooner we can optimize. And that leads us into the second big benefit of getting started early, which is the sooner we start to optimize what we're spending now, the sooner we can start to scale that spend. And if we can start to scale that spend on only the things that are really leading to sales, it means that throughout Q4 and beyond, I feel like Buzz Lightyear here, through Q4 and beyond, that we are going to have more sales. And the sooner we get started with that, the sooner we can get the data, the sooner we can optimize, the sooner we can scale, the more sales we can collect over that entire period. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The other thing I want to add to that is the one thing that we will also get is important data. And here's one thing, and I was just actually explaining this to my wife the other day, and that is we just started running ads for some Halloween stuff. Just started, right? I think we're like 2 days in. All right. And the cool thing is let's say there was 10 products. Okay. I'm able to now immediately, I'm talking within an hour, I can see impressions. All right. So why is that important? Why do I care? Well, because if I get impressions, that's showing me that that keyword and the keywords in my listing are being searched for and I am showing up. All right. So if I put something out there and I want to see, is there any demand for this thing right now? I can go ahead and just run some ads. Not going to pay unless they click. So those impressions, I'm not paying for them, right? If I get a click, I pay for it. So this also allows me to see, okay, what products are starting to show good signs of life here, right? And it starts with impressions, right? If we're getting impressions, and then we can go into, okay, how many clicks, how many sales? Okay. Now, right now, you might get impressions, you might get a couple clicks, but you didn't get a sale. Well, a lot of people would be like, well, that's bad, right? No, that just means that people, they might have put it in their cart, they might have favorited it. I mean, heck, we're getting a ton of favorites right now, right? But they're not buying right now. Why? Maybe it's a little early. Maybe they just wanted to bookmark it. Maybe they just wanted to, save it so they can come back to it, right? So we have to look at ads again as a tool, and doing them earlier, okay, is going to also give us really, really important data. And there's one little thing that they just announced. It's actually in your dashboard, and I don't know if everyone is seeing it yet, but they are experimenting with giving you your listings with some suggested tags. And so what this is telling me is that they're using tags, by the way. So if anybody says, well, I don't think they use tags, they are using tags, but they're also saying, hey, we want to give you more visibility. We found 2 tags that possibly could drive more people to your listing. Do these make sense? And then you have the option to say yes or no. All right. So that's something else that's just been released that showed up in my dashboard just the other day. So to kind of wrap this up, how soon? As soon as possible. All right. As soon as possible in getting that stuff. And I would say if you're like, well, I don't want to start advertising Christmas stuff yet, don't yet then. That's fine. But I would say you probably want to start 60 days before the actual time you want to start selling stuff. I would say at least 30 days, but 60 days, I would say would be something that we would probably do on some of our products that are geared towards that holiday.
So Scott, are you only running ads for Halloween stuff right now, or are you starting to think about Thanksgiving and Christmas stuff in the ads as well?
Yeah, well, right now we do have a couple of Christmas items that are, and the only reason why is because they have been popular sellers last year. So what we're doing is just putting it out there. And remember, guys, we're not paying unless we're getting a click. So it doesn't cost anything. Now, that doesn't mean I want to run a whole bunch of ads, because then it's going to take my budget and kind of like disperse it amongst a whole bunch. But I would say I'm only advertising the ones that have done well last year. And then right now we're really primarily focusing on the next one that's upcoming, which is Halloween. So that's the one that we're putting a lot of our effort in. And we will probably start to sprinkle in some some fall Thanksgiving ones here, I would say, in the next 30 days.
I should probably unmute myself. We just got a question that came in, and I know we actually had one queued up that was very similar. And it's basically, is there a low price point or profit amount where it doesn't make sense to run ads? What are your thoughts on that? Is there a time where you would say definitely don't run ads right now? Or should everybody be doing it and trying to figure out how to make it work for their specific margin and price point?
Well, I think the way that you have to look at it is this. Okay, if you're selling a product, okay, and you want to make money on the product, which I'm pretty sure you do, because you're probably, wanting to make some money, right? You have to ask yourself, how am I going to get this in front of the most people? Okay. And so the way that I think about it is this: Etsy wants to promote products that are selling, and they will promote it organically. So if someone does a search for, a keyword that's related to your item, they'll show up. And then if you are running ads, they will push that product, right? But if you're getting sales on that product, you're then going to get free traffic. That's what we want, right? So we have to think about this. Sacrifice in the beginning to get the rewards later, right? And that's a tough concept for a lot of people to understand, because right away they're like, well, I'm not making much money. I'll give you an example. So we just launched probably like 4 different products. And what I did was I lowered my price to where maybe making $1, right? Running Etsy ads. And the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to get sales and I want to get reviews. And so I'm going to do that until I get some sales, until I get some reviews, and then I can go ahead and raise my price. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to then start ranking organically, because Etsy is going to promote products that are selling, period. All right. So to answer the question, I believe that you should run ads to get sales. Doesn't mean you're making a profit yet. And that then will translate to getting profit later after you start ranking in search. If you're thinking about it, well, I'm just going to launch my product, do great SEO, and I'm going to rank, and it doesn't matter if that guy or girl is selling a lot on that. I've got a better optimized listing. It's not going to matter. So you have to get those sales. So I would say if you have a cheap product and you're wondering if you should run ads, yes, you probably should, but you also should be thinking to yourself, how can I create other products that make more money that just aren't cheap? That would be my next part here, is like, how can we create more products for this one customer to buy? That's why we talk about building a brand, not just an Etsy business.
I won't say cheap. I will say inexpensive, right? Because I know everything that everybody's making is super high quality. And we don't ever want to give anybody the impression that it's not. To me, ads are a two-step process. And I don't care if you're selling a $5 product or a $500 product. Step one, the reason that we talk about running ads is because we're trying to get the data back, Scott. To your point that you just made, we need to get impressions. We need to get sales. That's what really fuels the Etsy algorithm. The nice backside of this is, yes, we can start to feed some of that data into Etsy to say, hey, we are relevant for flibbity gibbet, whatever the keyword is. Step two, then, as the seller, is to say, now that I have this data, what do I do with it? Remember, our job as an entrepreneur is to problem solve. So what is the problem that we now have? Well, either our ads are profitable right out of the box, which happens more than you would like to think, or my ads aren't profitable. And so the problem that we are then solving is not, should I run ads? Because we should be running ads even just to get the data back. But then the problem becomes, how can I make my ads profitable, or can I make my ads profitable? If the answer is I can't make my ads profitable, then the question becomes why, right? We just have to work our way down that path. Why can't I? Well, the cost per click is $2 per click, extreme example, and I sell a $5 product. For me to get one person there, even if I had a 100% conversion rate, then that would never be profitable for me. Okay, that gives us the answer to the question, the furthest down that rabbit hole that we can go. We can't make it work there. If the answer is, well, I'm only getting a 3% conversion rate when somebody clicks from the ads, and if I could get that to 5%, then they would be profitable. That's then the problem that we have to solve. So we have to think about it in kind of that two-step process. One, let's run them and get the data back. And then two, let's problem solve. What's profitable? Keep that running. If there's nothing that profitable, or we are just trying to figure out if we can make them profitable, then work your way down that value chain to say, okay, is it possible to make these profitable? Is it rational to reach that goal? And then how do I do that? And if it's a conversion rate issue, which is the thing, Scott, I think we get that more than anything else. And the version of this question that we had queued up before we actually got it here while we were talking about it, they said, I have a 3% conversion rate. So we then have to problem solve to say, okay, if we get that to 4 or 5%, does that then make these ads profitable? And if so, then our job as the seller, as the problem solver, is to figure out why only 3%, which is extremely low, especially on a platform like Etsy, 3% of the people coming to that listing are converting. What are my competitors doing? What are my competitors' conversion rates like? And that's where a tool like Everbee that gives us those conversion rate estimates comes in really handy, because we can easily run an Everbee search on all of the listings that we're competing against and saying, hey, this guy's converting at 10, he's converting at 15. What are they doing that I'm not? And how can I improve my conversion rate to make those ads profitable? In some cases, the answer is going to be that you can't make them profitable, and that's okay. But we have to work through that problem-solving process. And in my mind, running it to see if they'll be profitable and running it to get the data back is always more than worth it. So even if you're selling a lower price product, it's more than worth it to turn them on, to get the data back, and to see if there's a path to making them profitable. As you and I have talked about in the past, Scott, typically we'll see 20 to 25% of sales coming from ads when we're running something long term. 75 to 80% is coming from organic. If we can get the data back on the ad side, that then influences 75 or 80% of the sales that we're going to get long term. So it's going to be worth it, even if we can't make them profitable. It's worth it just to get the data back.
Yep, that's good stuff. All right, I did want to address a couple questions here real quick. Speed round. Andrew had said, why did you not run a sale rather than lowering the price? I did both. Okay, so we basically did both. The regular price, let's say, was $44.95, and then we did a discount for like 45%, and then it brought the price down, and then that's what's displaying. So we did we did both of them. And I didn't mention that, but I probably should have, because that is another part of the conversion aspect that will increase if you run a sale, because you see that you're saving money. Us as humans love to save money, right? Like, so that's a great idea to do that. So yes, we are doing that. I just failed to mention that. So thanks for bringing that up. Is there a way to incentivize customers to leave a review? I have 41 sales and only 4 reviews. That's about right. I mean, you're getting, what is that, Chris? 10%? Like, so.
Yeah, just under.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not terrible. I mean, that's pretty good. So what do you need to do? You need to get more sales. The other thing that you could do is reach out to those customers and say, hey, just checking in with you. Wanted to make sure everything was okay. If there's any problems, any questions, let me know. I'm always here to help. You know, I'm family. We're a small family business, and we just want to make sure that our customers have a 5-star experience or something like that, right? So you bring it up. You don't say, I want a review, none of that stuff. And then that could get you a couple more reviews. I just would not say, if you would do me a favor and leave me a review, that would be great. So just touching base with them reminds them, and then it's like no one's doing that. So it's like it stands out. So you just want to stand out. That's what I would say there. Let me see here. I had another one here. Okay. This was from Julia. I like this. Is there a lowest price point and or profit amount or margin below which it isn't worth it to run ads? And I think we kind of addressed this, but I kind of want to give a short answer here. Because I do have an answer here, and it's pretty simple. Is like, if you are selling an item and it's a low margin, then you have to start thinking to yourself, one, can I raise my price? Can I add personalization? Can I do something else to increase that profit margin? And if not, then how do I get more organic? And that's getting more sales, through your ads. So this way here, you can bump that up. Conversion, maybe it can go up. Maybe you're at a 1% or a 2% conversion. How can you get that conversion to go to 3 or 4? How can you leverage the traffic that you're already getting? That's what you would need to be working on. But as far as like only looking at the Etsy ads as your main driver of traffic, I wouldn't look at it that way. Like Chris said, 25% should come from ads. The rest should come from organic, but that's going to take some time. And then once you do that, then the profit margin is going to be where you want it to be. Let's see. Okay. Any other quick questions on this here, Chris, before we move on? There's a bunch of questions. Oh, guys, before I do though, wait a minute. Before we move on, I got one thing. I need them to tickle that like button again, will you? If you guys could do that, just give it a little tickle. That's all. If you found this valuable, or if you're finding this valuable, do us a favor and tickle that like button a little bit. We're not going to say hit it, smash it, none of that stuff, because we don't want you to hurt the like button. We just want you to tickle it a little bit. So if you would do that, I'd appreciate it. I might even get a t-shirt that says, could you tickle the like button?
Tickle the like button. All right. So when we're talking about ads, Scott, are we talking about on-platform ads or off-platform ads? The answer is we're always talking about Etsy ads, meaning the on-platform ads, because you don't have any control over the off-platform ads. But the offshoot of this question, Scott, that you and I get all the time is, if I'm under that $10,000 threshold, and for those of you guys who don't know, if you're selling on Etsy and you sell more than $10,000 in a year, you can't turn them off. But if you sell under $10,000 in a year, you can. So the question we get all the time is, should I leave offsite ads on? And to me, the answer is yes. Why? Because the only time that you even have to think about it is when you make a sale, right? And so Etsy is driving you free traffic, infinite traffic until you make a sale. And then once you make a sale, you pay them a small percentage of that. So to me, to get the sale, it's always going to be more than worth it to leave it on. And you may find, right, that let's say you have 2 products in the store, the one that they keep selling from offsite ads, you can't make a profit on when they do that. Well, then we have to think about the things that Scott was just talking about in terms of, do I have a lower price point? Can I add a variation that's a higher price point? Can I add personalization? Can I add other products that these people are going to come back and buy? And all of those kinds of things. I would recommend that people always leave the offsite ads on, because again, it gets us traffic, it brings us sales. And those are the 2 things that really drive the organic side of the Etsy algorithm more than anything else. And if we can get even a handful of sales, even if they're break even for us from the offsite ads, that can really start to drive the growth on what we see as the 75 to 80% of sales coming from the organic side of the equation. So to me, if that's the end note of that question, then yeah, I would leave the offsite ads on. and also turn on the Etsy pay-per-click ads, which would be the on-site Etsy ads, or what is typically referred to just as Etsy ads.
Awesome. Okay. Here's another great question, Chris. How can I use social media to drive more sales and traffic for this upcoming Q4? So, what do you think, Chris? What is a strategy or some steps someone could take to use social media to increase all of that?
Well, I think you and I are huge fans of audience building to begin with, and to me, all social media is a way to build an audience. Whether you're talking about something that's more owned social media that you have direct access to, like a YouTube, something that's a little bit more evergreen, like YouTube or Pinterest, or you're talking about Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, whatever, whatever 7 other new platforms have come out this week that I'm not aware of because I'm now officially old and not hip with the cool kids anymore about all of the new social media things. But realistically, what I would be looking at doing is finding communities inside of those platforms of people who would already be interested in my niche. This is very easy to do somewhere like Pinterest, somewhere like Facebook groups. It's a little bit harder to do somewhere like an Instagram or a TikTok. But what we should be doing is creating niche related content. And if we can double down and help share that content in those groups and build our followings, whether that's just having them follow us on social media and then starting to talk about what we're doing, or whether that's driving them over to something we actually own, like our website, an email list, one of those kinds of things, that's where I would really double down and focus on the social media side of things. Create niche related content around the products and the interests that people who buy your stuff actually have, and start to build your owned version of that audience so that when it's time for them to start to think about this kind of a thing, that we can drive them over there. If it were me, I'd be focusing on the more evergreen things, YouTube, Pinterest, some of those kinds of places. But if you're looking for a quick hit, Facebook groups are a highly underutilized resource. And there's pretty much one for any interest, any niche that you can imagine. There's at least one Facebook group that can help you serve that.
Yeah, I would add this. If you are, maybe just starting out on Etsy and you're kind of doing all of that stuff, but you're like, how do I tap into the social media? I hear everybody talking about TikTok and Snapchat and, Threads and all of these platforms, right? What one do I do? How am I going to be able to get free traffic, right? Well, you have to remember, like building an audience, it's going to take time. And that means it's not really free, right? I mean, yes, you're not transferring money, but you are spending time. What I would say is, yes, you want to build your own audience, build your own email list. That's not social media, but it is a channel that you can drive traffic. We're a huge fan of that, by the way. But what I would say, a little shortcut, is I would leverage other people's social media. So I would go and start reaching out. So maybe take an hour, right, out of your day and go look at all of the different social media audience builders that are out there in your community or in your niche. And then from there, reach out to them and offer to send them some free product, offer to pay them for a sponsored post, and that way there, you're going to be able to leverage their audience and you're not building your own. Now, one thing I would say, instead of just driving them over to your Etsy shop, you might want to drive them to your own website where you can capture an email for maybe a coupon code, and then you would forward them over to your Etsy shop. This way here, you're capturing the email at the same time. But that's what I would say. Leverage other people's audiences. To me, that would be the most bang for your buck right now. But I would say long-term, like Chris said, if you want to build your own audience, it is going to take time, but it is worth it. All right.
So what you're talking about there is that super sexy buzzword, influencer marketing, right? Finding some people in your niche, in your space that have an audience. And that's always a great way of going about it. You will be surprised at the number of people who won't charge you an arm and a leg to do something if you can hook them up with some really cool, unique products.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions in the comments? And if not, we can go ahead and we can wrap it up. I thought I saw one come through. I don't know if you did. Oh,
I have 2 quick ones. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
First, Jack in the Shop says, does low stock limited quantities make people want to buy faster? Anytime you have a limited quantity or a deadline, right? That's the reason that sales and promotions work inside the Etsy ecosystem. It can be a conversion rate booster. The trick with that is you have to have enough people that somebody says, I don't want to risk not being able to get it, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's one of the reasons sales and promotions work really well. It is a conversion rate booster, but it's not necessarily going to be the thing that drives all of your sales, it can have an impact. It's not always going to, but it's definitely one of the factors that you would want to take a look at.
Here's an important thing, though, to consider if you're going to try and do that. And this is something that Debbie, who also helped us with a couple of our courses, and also she's the one that got my wife started on the Etsy thing. And she had said that, and I see that this could definitely be the case where this could actually hurt your sales. Hear me out. So if you say, I only have 10 of these, right? But the demand for it is high. Okay. And you would think, well, that's going to make someone come to the listing and go, oh, I better get this thing before I don't have a chance anymore. The downside is, and where Etsy could see a problem in this, and their algorithm could see a problem in this, is if I send you a bunch of traffic and you can't deliver, that's bad for the customer. So we need to be careful with that. We kind of stopped doing that. We were doing that, by the way. We stopped doing it. Can I say that I've seen a difference having a low quantity to not really, but I didn't want to take the chance. And I thought if it was a conversion booster, it was very small. Now, the way that you would do this is you could do it within your own email list. Then I could see it being very effective, because now we can say, hey, for the next 7 days, we have 25 of these available. First come, first serve. Like, yes. Now, a way also to do this, to add that little bit of scarcity in there, because that's technically what you're doing using a strategy like this, is just run a sale for 7 days. 40% off, run a 7-day sale. And then what's going to happen is Etsy's going to have their little badge there, and it's going to say, a certain amount of time, and then it'll come down to like the last day, how many hours, all of that stuff. And that could be a conversion booster. But I would say don't do that on your inventory, because then what happens is, like I said, Etsy can look at it as like, oh, they don't have a lot of inventory. We don't want to send too many people there, because then if they can't buy it, they're going to be upset and it's going to be a bad buyer experience. So that's what I would say to do there.
Yeah, I think that's a little different. Like if you have something that's not a custom or limited run product, right? Like a lot of stuff on Etsy, if you're not going to have the listing again, then obviously list the quantity that you have. If it's a listing that could be an evergreen listing, that I think is where you would really run into that issue that you were talking about, Scott, which is like, well, we don't want to rank them real high because they're never going to be able to do this again, right? But if we only have 5, then yeah, list 5. Don't say that you have 50, right? Just list the quantity that you have. If it's an evergreen listing, I wouldn't be trying to play the game of saying that you have 4 or 5. 1, for the reason that you talked about, Scott, but 2, let's say you have 100 listings. How likely is it that you forget to go in and put another unit or another 3 units on that listing, and then you lose out on those sales because you're trying to play a game? So if it's real scarcity, go for it. If it's artificial scarcity for the sake of scarcity, we can create that in other ways that have fewer long-term effects, like running a sale or promotion inside of the Etsy ecosystem and using a time deadline or a price deadline as the thing that's creating that scarcity, rather than the physical scarcity of you'll never be able to buy it again.
Yep.
One last one that I had that came in. How many products do you have this year for Q4 versus last year? And are you ramping up personalization? And are you going to have more personalization in Q4? So are you tripling down on the number of products that you're creating in Q4 this year? And if so, are you also doubling and tripling down on the personalization, or are you pulling back on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we are definitely doubling down on personalization for a couple of different reasons. Number one, last year was the first year that my wife offered personalization. And yes, it definitely increased sales dramatically. Okay. Like, I can't give you the exact percentage, but it was more than 50% personalization. Okay. Which also made us say, wow, that was a lot of work, right? Like my wife was, up late at night putting orders together so people could get it in time. You got to remember that order doesn't get processed until you finalize it in whatever print on demand service you're using. We're using Printify, and then it won't actually get dispatched and get printed and then get shipped. So you have to be on top of it. Luckily, there's a new tool out there, and I wasn't even going to bring this one up yet, but it's in beta. I'm actually using it right now, and it's, like I said, it's in beta. There's improvements happening to it right now. It's going to be a great tool. It's called Hello Custom. You can check that out by going over to creators.com/hello. And you can check that out, but that's going to automate our personalization. With that being said, yes, we are going all in on personalization. And one of the other reasons is because it takes your pool of competition and it makes it smaller, because not a lot of people want to do the personalization. Even if they could automate it, they don't want to do it, right? So we're seeing that as an opportunity. We definitely think that if you do searches for personalization on Etsy, there's a lot of searches for that, right? So people will start their search personalized bass fishing shirt, right? Like they're going to put that in there. If you're not offering personalization, you miss out on that entire segment of that audience. So that's why we're doing it. And yes, we are doubling down. The exact number of products, it wasn't like a crazy amount last year as far as personalization. I'd have to go back and like count them. But I would say, I mean, probably 20, maybe, you know, I mean, there's variations to it too, right? Like we would have one design and then we would adapt it to like shoulder niches. So yeah, I would say 2025. But this year probably be double, I would say.
Was that across all of Q4? So that'd be Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It was 2025. Or are you talking 2025 for each kind
I
of
don't
holiday?
think we really moved into the personalization until after Halloween. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we had a full Q4 to really have personalization. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about that this year because we are starting it earlier. And now we are thinking along the lines of like personalization. Like, you know, I'll say that to my wife all the time. Like she comes up with a really cool design. I'm like, okay, how do we add personalization to that? And then we have to think through like, okay, what are we gonna have a saying with it? Is it just going to be, you know, a date, you know, whatever. So, we're always thinking right now personalization as much as we possibly can.
Awesome. I think that wraps it up.
Cool. Well, man, I mean, we had about 100 people on here all at once. I think up to 110 people all at once. So I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us, and let us know in the comments, what is one thing that you took away from this live. And then also, if you could also drop in the comments, what's something that you would like us to do an upcoming live stream on? What topic would you like us to drill into? We'd love to know that as well. And if you are watching this on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe. And here's why. Because, well, we are also doing free Etsy shop audits from time to time. We usually do one a month, and we will pull from our audience on YouTube, and we will let people know in advance, and you might get picked to have your Etsy shop looked at and an audit done. And we'll basically give you our thoughts and opinions on what you can do to improve it, grow sales and traffic and all that good stuff. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel. All right. And then also make sure that you tickle that like button. I'm liking saying that. I think that's a good one. I think I'm definitely gonna, it's gonna grow on me. I think I'm gonna like that. Anyway, guys, that is going to wrap up this session, this episode of the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. If you are watching this on Facebook, thank you. If you are listening to this on iTunes with the podcast, thank you. And that's gonna wrap it up. So guys, take care. Take action. Have an awesome, amazing day. And we will see you right back here on the next episode. Take care, guys.